Hi, I'm Ayla with True You Systems, and today we're going to be talking about the two main types of INTJs. So do you ever notice that you're reading something about INTJs and you're like, wow, this all really fits, and then all of a sudden there'll be something where it's like, no, that doesn't really fit. That can sometimes be because INTJ is covering a bunch of different possible Enneagram types. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the two main Enneagram types that tend to be INTJs. And they're really quite different from each other. And so because of that, it can cause that, oh, I don't actually do that behavior, but I definitely do those other ones. Okay, so briefly, what are INTJs? I standing for introverted, that means they need time away from others in order to recharge and have energy. N for intuitive, which means they like to think about the big picture thinking, all of the what ifs, possibilities, and the future. T, they make decisions based on logic and reason rather than the feelings of themselves or the feelings of others. And lastly, J for wanting and needing a plan and feeling more comfortable with a plan rather than doing things on the fly. So the two main Enneagram types that INTJs tend to be are 5s, the observers, and 1s, the perfectionists. So let's look at some of the traits and behaviors of INTJs and see if they fit in more with type 1 or type 5. INTJs are often described as holding others to a high standard. And while this often is a behavior that you see with many INTJs, it's very specifically a trait of INTJ 1s versus INTJ 5s. Enneagram type 1s are concerned with not making mistakes, fixing errors, and in general making sure that other people don't make mistakes as well. And because of that, you see them holding others to high standards. Versus 5s, which might think to themselves, holding others to a high standard, does that mean I have to be involved with other people? And so they're not going to be as much doing that. Enneagram type 5s are concerned with not having their energy drained, making sure that other people are not imposing on them and needing things from them. And so going out there and saying something, correcting somebody else's mistake, their grammar mistakes, having particulars on that, it's going to make it so that then they have to engage with someone else. And so INTJ 5s tend to not do that as much as INTJ 1s. So another trait that INTJs are described as having is being visionary. And both 1s and 5s have visionary ideas in very different ways. 1s tend to have visionary ideas that have to do with making the world better, with having things kind of somehow end up perfected, and that there's like a moral stance to it, some way that something should be. Whereas 5s tend to be visionary for innovation, for its own sake, kind of because wouldn't it be cool, rather than because there's some grand moral vision. INTJs are described as having a love of learning, and both INTJ 1s and INTJ 5s share that, but with very different motivations for why they're doing it. For 5s, it has to do with wanting to master a skill, be more competent in something, generally understanding and knowing enough in order to be in the world and competent in it. For 1s, it is more to do with wanting to become more virtuous, to improve themselves more. An example of this would be that if a 1 sets out to read a book because it's one that people should read, they will finish it because you're supposed to finish books if you start them, versus a 5 where they're going to say, that book was interesting to a point, I'm curious about it, but then I wasn't interested in it and I don't need to keep reading it if I'm not interested in it, I'm just going to go on to something else. So one thing that's kind of interesting about how INTJs get described for their work ethic is that it's almost like there's multiple things combining that don't make sense and don't go together. So on the one hand, they'll describe something like an INTJ figuring out a way where they can automate their job without anybody knowing about it, so that they only have to work 4 hours in an entire week and have to do very little because the work is meaningless. And then in the next moment, they'll be described as being dedicated and highly organized and goal-driven and prioritizing work super highly. So which one of these is true? Is it that INTJs don't make any sense and they're just doing these crazy opposites? No, it's that one thing is describing typical 5 traits, the first example of automating their job so they don't have to work as much so that they can do something else that's more interesting and more engaging for their mind. Or ones who are highly diligent and organized and dedicated and focused. And so it's describing those 2 different elements that are both seen in INTJs, but from very different Enneagram types. INTJs often get described as having a disregard for societal rules and generally having an interest more in their own ideas. They just don't seem to care that much of what is expected of them. This is a really classic trait, but what it's describing specifically is INTJ 5s. INTJ 1s don't experience that quite as much. They do care what society expects of them. There really are rights and wrongs. If you're supposed to go to a dinner and perform a certain way, you really need to do that. You can't just blow it off because you're not interested. Another classic INTJ trait is that they are described as being robots, not having strong feelings about things. And in many ways, INTJs can be like that. But usually this is describing specifically INTJ 5s, who when they learn something, when they're curious about something, curiosity is paramount. They just want to know more about something. It's not that they're going to have a strong feeling attached to what they learn, and it's going to be that it just gives them more information. Whereas INTJ 1s, when they learn something and take in new information, they're able to feel often very strongly about it and where it fits into a matrix of right and wrong. So an INTJ 1 and an INTJ 5 might read the same news article but come away with very different takes on it. A 1 might come away reading it thinking, wow, the world's all changing and going bad and I need to fix it and there's injustices in the world that need to be corrected. And a 5 might come away reading the same article thinking, this is more information that I can file away into my mental knowledge and pathways to understand how the world works. So as you can see, one tends to be more like a robot and the other one tends to be more heated and up in arms about something and wanting to take action, which is another thing that's different about INTJ 1s and INTJ 5s. INTJ 1s tend to be able to take action on something before they know everything about it versus INTJ 5s who even when they know everything about something may still not take action on it. INTJ 1s and INTJ 5s both do a lot of research, and through their research, they come across a lot of experts, and they handle those experts differently depending on their type. For INTJ 1s, they're going to be most likely to listen to an expert if they meet the right credentials. 5s love expertise, but they want to independently verify what an expert is saying. One of the things people associate with INTJs is the experience of giving advice that's very thoughtful and then no one else is listening to it and feeling really frustrated and disappointed. This is a classic Enneagram Type 1 experience, and 5s generally don't experience the world that way. 1s often do give really good advice, but it can be packaged critically and so hard for people to sometimes take in. Sometimes INTJs are described as being into the finer things, liking things that are classy, knowing what kind of wine pairs best with what types of meat. While this is true for many INTJs, it's often most true for 1 INTJs. 5 INTJs are going to be thinking things like, that seems kind of irrational to spend that kind of money on wine. 5s can be kind of cheap. And while they can spend hours learning everything you need to know about every varietal and type of grape and wine that you can, they're going to be pained to spend more than $15 on a bottle of wine. So are INTJs only 5s and 1s? Not by any means. There are other types that tend to be INTJs. It's just at a lower rate in the population. Honorable mentions here for other INTJs in the Enneagram: 3s. That's that whole when you're talking about ambition and goal-oriented stuff. A lot of times that's really referring to INTJ 3s. Generally speaking, 3s are usually more extroverted, but there are introverted 3s. Another honorable mention are 6s. There are INTJ 6s. This is all of those descriptions having to do with mistrust, having problems with authority with INTJs, and also conspiracy theories in general. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, press that like button. It lets me know what kind of videos you like to see and want to see more of. And let me know in the comments below what you found interesting about the differences between INTJ 1s and INTJ 5s. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And any other INTJs out there, I'd love to hear how you relate to this video as well. Thanks so much. I learned so much from all of you. Hope to see you again soon. Bye!